Today in Matt's class, we are going to show you how you can use three-dimensional arrows to help convey an awesome sense of motion in your visual storytelling. So today we are going to talk 3D arrows. Hanging out with me today is Declan O'Neal. We've got some really good juice. We are going to show you some really cool arrows. So here's what's up. Some of you might be thinking, 3D arrows, why in the world would I need to draw those? Well, more and more, whether your specialty is going to be animation or comic books or manga or any kind of storyboarding, anything in advertising, more and more we are dealing with motion. So kind of the age of everything being just a movie poster or like a billboard or something like that, something static, you're just not seeing it as much. In fact, when you go to the movie theater now, although not many people are going to the movie theater right now, but when you guys go to the movie theater, a lot of movie posters are being replaced with flat screen televisions turned sideways where you're watching motion posters. And you're seeing movie posters move, or when someone walks by, like the trailer will play inside the movie poster. Everything is motion now. You guys need to start planning for that, and the easiest way that you can plan for that with your visuals is to use arrows. So here's how it works. So there's three kinds of arrows that you can draw, and the first two don't count. So some people draw arrows like this, and that's not really a great way to draw an arrow because that's a one-dimensional arrow. It just doesn't look very professional. Now, some people draw arrows like this, and there are reasons why you would do that. But again, it's just kind of chintzy and cheap. What you really want to do to convey a sense of 3D motion, you want to draw a three-dimensional arrow. The way that you do it is really easy because all you have to do, you start by drawing a two-dimensional arrow. And then if you add, I call them wispies, I don't know why, but if you just add like a little kite tail to each one of the corners like so, then you can add in the three-dimensional thickness like this. And then sometimes to help your arrow stand out even more, you can shade in the arrow, and that just kind of helps make your three-dimensional arrow stand out even more. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, okay, come on, really? I mean, if you have an arrow pointing this way, what's the difference of drawing this and drawing a three-dimensional arrow? They're both drawing in the exact same direction, right? I am about to blow your mind. Watch this. So I'm going to draw two arrows exactly the same. Let's say we've got an arrow, and let's say I'm going to draw another arrow. Let's say in Photoshop, I rubber stamp this arrow. I'm going to put the exact same one right next to it. All right, so these arrows aren't perfectly the same, but let's just pretend, right? So both of these arrows are pointing slightly upward and slightly to the left, right? However, watch what happens when I add the three-dimensional thickness in different places. So let's say we add the three-dimensional thickness right here. Now I'm going to add the three-dimensional thickness on this one, let's say over here. So the question is, are these arrows pointing in the same direction? Hopefully you're saying, no, they're not. It's almost a 90-degree difference now. Well, why? I mean, the arrows were both pointing in exactly the same direction, slightly upward and slightly over to the right. The difference is because where you put the three-dimensional thickness, it's going to change slightly where those arrows are pointing. That's how powerful adding in the three-dimensional thickness is. You want to start doing that because even though with the media and communication arts, we're always trying to convey a sense of 3D space on a two-dimensional surface, whether it's a flat drawing or whether it's a flat screen or something like that, but we're always trying to convey a three-dimensional space. I remember when I was a kid, the first thing that really moved me with motion was the very first time I saw Star Wars. If you've seen Star Wars, you probably have seen one of the movies where Star Wars shoots back into space and you see all the words, going back. Well, the first time I ever saw that, at 4 years old, the camera pans down through space and it kind of comes down to a horizon of a planet, and this is what it looks like. So it's a screen like this. Here's the planet, Tatooine. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. There's like a moon over here, and then there's this Rebel blockade runner. It's a Carillion Corvette, the Tantive 4, and it looks like this giant starship, right? But then there is this starship that starts chasing it, shooting lasers at it, and it's so big, it actually flies over the top of the camera into the screen. This thing is ginormous, and there's like this docking bay like this. This was the first time movement really just blew my mind as a kid. Later in life, one of my teachers was a gentleman named Gary Meyer, who was actually one of the storyboard artists on the first Star Wars movie. He actually showed me what the storyboard really looked like for this, and what it looked like, there was an arrow going like this, conveying the movement of the Star Destroyer flying overhead. So it looked a little bit like this, and you can tell by the way the arrow is how it's flying over the top like so. This blew my mind as a youngin', and it was really, really cool. Changed my life forever, made me want to get into making movies and drawing comic books and all of that fun stuff. So now we can get a little bit more complicated than this. Let's imagine that we have a new Pixar movie. And this movie isn't Toy Story, this is called Sports Story. So imagine it's kind of like a Toy Story movie, but let's say there's this little kid who stops playing with all of his sports equipment, all of his actual gaming gear, because instead he's more obsessed with playing basketball this way on the Nintendo Switch or on PlayStation, which is not the same thing, right? You guys should get out and play actual sports. So let's say in this movie, all of the sports equipment ends up having a life of its own, and it kind of comes to life in little Timmy's bedroom. So let's say that there's all these adventures that all of this sports equipment has, kind of wreaking havoc throughout the entire house. So the first time this basketball is going to kind of peer around the corner out of the bedroom, and let's say it's going to bounce down the stairs. So let's say we've got a 3/4 shot, and we want to indicate that this basketball is going to be bouncing down the stairs like that. In order to draw a 3-dimensional arrow, what you could do, my method is kind of going through arrows like this. Even though you don't want to draw a 1-dimensional arrow, you kind of start 1-dimensionally with the motion, then you add the second part of the arrow to make it 2-dimensional, then you add the 3rd dimension. So this is how I would do it. Let's say the motion goes something like this. Let's say you've got, so that's kind of the motion bouncing down the stairs. That's my 1-dimensional arrow, if you will. Now we're going to make it a little bit more ribbon-like, and we're going to draw it 2-dimensionally like so. So here's my 2-dimensional ribbon. And already now you can almost see, it almost looks 3-dimensional. You can really get a sense of how this is bouncing down. Man, these are wide steps, but you guys get the idea. So now what we have to do, this is 2-dimensional, we have to add in the 3rd dimension. And in order to do that, all I have to do is add in the 3-dimensional . So there is my 3-dimensional arrow, and in this case, what you could do these are all the, I don't know what they are, it's like the sticky grip, so you can, if you've got large hands, you can palm the basketball, and they kind of glisten in the Friday night lights. That's how you would show doink, 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 doink. John Lasseter and Andrew Stanton, there is your next Pixar hit. Free, take it, it's yours. It's a hit waiting to happen. So you can get really complicated with your arrows, all kinds of things that you can do. Any motion that you can possibly imagine, you should be able to draw arrows for it. When you're drawing arrows, remember when I talked in one of the previous videos on drawing the female head, I believe. You want to start lightly. So once you get practice, you can kind of go in and draw your arrows. But because you're drawing movement, what you don't want to do, you don't want to just start drawing your arrows like this. You don't want to scratch your way to a better future and then kind of draw your arrows that way, because then your arrows look hairy and then that doesn't make sense. Unless it is like electrified movement, I guess maybe that would work. So if you're not comfortable drawing these at first, then you want to start lightly, draw in. You know, if you need to draw it in like so, okay, plan it out if that's how you're comfortable drawing, you know, kind of mapping it out like that. But then when it comes time to drawing the actual dark lines, you want to make slashes and you want the actual lines themselves to convey movement. So So see how the lines themselves really, even if the lines aren't perfect, it looks like you meant for it to be that way. And it just looks a little bit more professional when you've got, maybe it's hard to see with the orange here, but when you can get a little bit more. Sometimes, again, if you've got the sound effects,
it helps to make the noise.
They're absolutely necessary.
And can you see in this one here, it really feels like it's really kind of shooting out towards the camera. So it really helps if you can convey that motion and draw with confidence. Confidence is key. All right, let's draw some fun arrows. I'm gonna draw like a starship. So I'm gonna imagine like a starship flying away from us, and then it's gonna circle back around, and then it's gonna come towards us again.
You mentioned lightning motion, so I think I'm gonna do one like that.
So this one here, you can kind of see, because of how big it is here, it's starting here, it's shooting back away from us, it's circling around, and then coming back towards you once again. You might have a starship, for example, that's like two pieces, and then maybe there's a cockpit on either side, and it detaches and then kind of breaks away from each other. Or you may have a situation where someone takes something and they smash it on the ground and it splits into different pieces. So you may have a scenario where something splits into different directions. What if you had something that smashed into a wall? Is there something creative we could do with the arrow itself, where the arrow either starts to crack apart or kind of breaks apart into pieces? Can we do something fun with that? Where the arrow is like, this is the wall, so this is going to be the part that's broken a little bit more. So I'm going to have it kind of cracked here. I've kind of got all these pieces here. Now I have to take each one of these little pieces and add in the three-dimensional thickness. All right, so lots of really cool things you can do with your motion arrows. It's really going to help you convey a sense of motion into your visual storytelling. Motion's where it's at. You have fun drawing arrows today?
Definitely, yeah.
Now put it to the test.